Hello and welcome to the channel. Welcome today to my review of one of the best looking watches I've ever had a chance to handle, a timepiece coming from a company that put Korea on the map of microbrand watches, and one that ended up challenging my stance on homages, one that made me ask myself more questions than I was comfortable answering. This is Pitzmann 3. Just a couple of short years ago, a small seconds dress piece started popping up on the biggest channels dedicated to watchmaking. The name might have sounded German, but the brand was from Seoul. The level of fit and finish might have been worthy of a mainstream luxury brand, but its price tag read less than what such a brand would charge for just servicing one of their timepieces. More than just a debut, this watch was a statement. We've arrived, and its name was a strong declaration of intent. The first Pitzmann. This thinly veiled threat was immediately followed by a sophomore release that took that initial promise into the stratosphere. Pitzmann 2 was a breathtaking gala watch that struck the perfect balance between the wearability and the versatility of a daily driver and the established design language of the Korean culture. All of a sudden, Pitzmann were creating waves as their increasing popularity meant more watch enthusiasts of various backgrounds were exposed to the brand, leading to safe labels such as the Korean brand Seiko. Fortunately, the brand's third watch, the long-teased Deuce project, bears no resemblance to the fugly deformity that to this day is known as the first ever Chrono produced by Seiko's luxury division. Unfortunately, it bears a strong resemblance to a true icon of watchmaking. There's no beating around the bush. At first sight, Pitzmann 3 very much looks like a Daytona. And mind you, not any Daytona, but in this ice blue dial from more than a couple of meters away, it looks just like a baguette Playtona, the platinum-made watch launched by Rolex in 2013 to mark 50 years since the birth of the iconic Daytona Cosmograph. Getting closer, more than a few design choices will come into focus, turning what initially seems to be a clone into an homage. First off, the case is much more supple, and that shouldn't come as a surprise, as it's pretty much the same elegant case Pitzmann made for their second model. The lugs seem to flare out and have a very pronounced downturn at their tips. There are no crown guards to tip the balance off, but I would have appreciated a larger crown. The pushers, though, are delicious, and that red ring around the start-stop lever brings in a touch of sporty sophistication. Then, before moving on to the dial, we should take note of the bezel, which is black, unlike the brown Rolex chose to go with, and, in my opinion, it better complements the ice blue dial. As for the dial itself, it manages to look simultaneously more refined and more practical, with every element flawlessly integrated into an overall perfect design with all but a blemish: the date window. Just imagine what this watch would have looked like with the 6 o'clock subdial intact. That's not by any means saying the placement, integration and execution of the date window are bad. If this watch had to have a date, then this is as good as it can get. But seriously, did this watch need a date? Well, maybe it had to have one, but this is a subject for the section of the review dedicated to the components of the watch. Until then, let's just admire a bracelet that manages to look both classic and modern. A rather sophisticated take on the classic oyster style, a bracelet that unfortunately comes with an issue of its own: the lack of a micro-adjustment system. And this to me is very surprising, as the clasp itself is a fold-over construction to which such a vital system could have been implemented with minimum impact on its looks. The upside to this is that the integration is flawless, and at least a couple of half links should, theoretically at least, help anyone get a good fit. As promised, here's my explanation on why this watch had to have a date. Behind the solid caseback of the Pitzmann 3, there's a rather unusual engine. You see, the reason there are not many microbrand automatic chronographs out there is that there are not too many options when it comes to the calibers that can power them. There's the Chinese ST1940, which is only used by Vesuviate, the crazy expensive Swiss-made Solita and La Joux, and finally this one, Seiko's NE88. And the catch is that this caliber comes only in date configurations. So it was really a choice between having a date or a ghost position, and we all know how mad a ghost position drives watch collectors. I'm not gonna pretend I know what a vertical clutch is, but I know this is a feature of this caliber. I also know that the watch ticks at 4 Hz and it has a power reserve of up to 45 hours. What I found out is that a chronograph hand seems to have a mind of its own, and every once in a while it will decide to reset half a second before or after the 12 o'clock marker. As I said, this happens probably once every 15-20 resets, and it always gets fixed with the next reset. I have also found out that setting the time while the chrono function is on will also advance the 30 minutes and the 12 hours indicators. Not sure if this is relevant for anyone, but it's quite unique. What's not unique is the list of features this watch also comes with: 316L stainless steel, ceramic bezel, AR-coated flat sapphire crystal, and green-colored lume of unspecified provenience. This is where Pitzmann 3 literally shines. With the exception of the couple of thin chamfers running alongside its sides, the case is finely brushed in order to provide a canvas for the star of the show. I believe images are worth 1,000 words when describing how crisp this dial is, as there is literally no angle in which the light doesn't spectacularly bounce back from the hands, markers, and the outlines of the subdials and of the dial itself. As for how everything comes together, close to zero complaints. Maybe just the date wheel getting ever so slightly off-centered when advancing the date manually over multiple days, but this is a rather common issue for 99% of the watches, and it gets corrected once the date is allowed to change naturally. Although the bezel pushes the diameter of the watch up to 41mm, Pitzmann 3 wears pretty much as a standard 40. On my 19cm wrist it sits beautifully, and despite being an automatic chronograph, it's compact enough to slide under the cuff. The bracelet is substantial, and that is a good thing, as the balance on the wrist is perfect. But that isn't a given, unfortunately, as getting the perfect fit is a lottery because of the limited adjustability options. And unless you are skilled with the proper tools or willing to pay someone, you're stuck with the bracelet, because the spring bars are not of the quick release variety, there are no holes drilled in the lugs, and the slit to access the spring bar is narrow and deep. So, despite wanting to try on some really great straps I got courtesy of Vario and Watch Bandit, I chose not to fiddle too much with the bracelet. Anyway, the bracelet is fantastic, and if you manage to use its half links to get a great fit, I really don't see why you'd want to swap it. I've always had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about brands that play it safe by infusing unhealthy doses of famous designs into their work. It just feels lazy, like they're avoiding any real creativity. But then this watch showed up and completely knocked me off my high horse. I've always been dead set against homaging iconic designs, yet here I am wearing a watch that's 90% identical to a legendary model and loving it. So, what happened? Did I suddenly become more open-minded, or did I just cave to the very trend I've been railing against? Maybe I'm not as principled as I thought, or maybe this homage just snuck past my snobbery when I wasn't looking. I would love to read your thoughts on this rather polarizing issue, so use the comment section below to praise my open-mindedness or to berate me for selling out. And stay tuned for next week's video, which will be a world premiere review of a watch that came all the way from Mexico. Be safe, be well, and take good care of your wrists. You only have two.